Okay. Okay, you can still hear me, even though I'm doing, you can still hear me talk, you can still hear me play. Okay, awesome. All right, so let me check the chat really quickly. I'll just try to leave this open. Oh, I think they fixed this. Oh, yeah, I love my pup too. She's, the problem is she like pees random places, like my room when I'm not looking at her, and so I just let my parents watch her during class. Or she's a handful. She's adorable, except when she pees. Even then, I guess. Oh gosh, she just snuck in here again. One sec. Sorry, guys. Oh, all right, great. All right, awesome. Okay, I think I'm recording right now. And all right, people have their cameras on. Some people are having trouble with their cameras. But those of you who are not, just please start your video. Whoops. Okay. Okay. All right, so I guess I should ask, are there any questions to start out? I know that there were some things on the homework that might be a little confusing. I was going to address some of those things in class, but other things I was just going to sort of address as things came up while I explain new concepts to you. Okay. Sorry. All right. There's some technical difficulties I'm having right now. All right. I guess I'm sharing my screen. Okay. All right. Let's see. I think there's a kind of chord that I didn't tell you about last time, and it's called the Neapolitan chord. It's on your homework. I didn't actually expect you to answer the problem, but I think it's worth knowing what it is. Right here, I actually wrote Neapolitan. N stands for Neapolitan, and it's a flat 2 chord. So, for instance, I guess it's not that difficult to grasp, but if you have 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord, 1 chord, right? This would be the major chord built on the flat 2nd scale degree. So just to kind of drive the point home, it's 1, flat 2, 2, whoops, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So Nakul.
Yeah.
If you check the chat, they said we can't hear Sibelius.
Oh yeah. It's not playing right now, but let me actually I can make it so that it plays. It's not playing on my end either. should play now. Restarts. Yeah, so if you draw the triads of the major scale, the Neapolitan is the second. It's the flat. It's a major chord built on the flat second scale degree. So I guess a good example of a piece where that happens is Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and I can pull it up really quickly. I believe one time in class, last semester or last quarter, someone asked me about an analysis of this particular piece. And I believe people found it a little daunting what we came up with. And we can actually reanalyze it to kind of show you how the Neapolitan chord fits in there. Great, so you can hear that now? Sorry, I can't see your faces, so I can't tell. You can, great, all right, awesome. Okay, so these are the triads of the major scale. And I guess this one right here is the Neapolitan chord. Putting it in brown, Neapolitan chord. And it appears in certain situations. So for instance, you know, this is Moonlight Sonata. Whoops, get out of note entry mode. This is the Neapolitan chord. So if we actually look at those chords, I guess I'll block them out. Using my handy dandy piano keyboard today. Add the bass line. Okay. So what we have here, I guess from a Roman numeral analysis standpoint, I guess I'll put in a key signature. So this is less ugly. So we're in the key of C sharp minor, and you'll see a lot of accidentals disappear. Okay. Okay. And notice okay. Let's see what we got here. So this chord right here, in the key of C sharp minor, will be a 1 chord, a 1 minor chord. And then what you have here is still a 1 chord. I say this is a 1 chord. I guess I should explain why this is exactly a 1 chord. Well, if you reduce this to a snowman, and you remove all the duplicate notes, what you'll get is a C sharp minor triad. You can also see that the top of the fourth is a C sharp, and the interval between here and here is a minor third. At the top, might make my plosives a little bit less prominent.
Also, cool. It seems like the Sibelius is really quiet. I don't know if that's the case for everybody.
Okay, yeah, I can fix that. I think that's the case for me as well. That's actually a good sign. That means we're on the same page here. Okay, how about, it's a little better, right? Cool, all right. Hopefully that's audible enough. Yeah, so we have a C sharp minor triad right here. And yes, please pipe in through voice comment if something is an issue, because I can't see your faces right now. Okay, great. So what we have here is we have a C sharp minor triad in the right hand, but in the left hand we have a B. So that could be one of two things. So I guess, hopefully this isn't disorienting, but on the 8th note beats, I'm going to draw an alternate analysis. going to draw kind of a simplified version of what I see over here. This is the closed voicing root position version of the chord. Okay? So what we have here, really, if you include this B as part of the C sharp minor chord in the right hand, what we actually get is a C sharp minor 7th chord. Now, the thing about this is, well, I guess this could be considered a 1/7, right? But it's not really a 7 because it's an inversion, right? Meaning if we look at a C sharp minor scale, what we'll get is this. Whoops, not that. Right, so you can see how all three of these notes fit in nicely. Now let me remove these cautionary accidentals, right? You clearly see how all of these notes fit nicely into the scale and correspondingly into the key. So as a result, you could call this a 1/7, but it's not quite a 1/7. It's going to be some sort of inversion, right? So I guess now that we have the closed voiced root position version of the chord, you just have to compare the bass note of the chord we're trying to analyze against this note in the snowman, essentially, right? So if this note were the bottom note of the snowman, we'd be in root position. If this note is the first inversion of the snowman, sorry, if this note is the second note of the snowman, we're in first inversion. Okay? If this note is the third note of the snowman, we're in second inversion, which is precisely what we're in. Okay? So if you remember your handy dandy inversion pattern, first inversion is this, second inversion is this, third inversion is this, fourth inversion is this. Okay. First root position, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion, right? And write this out explicitly. Root position, 6/5 equals first inversion. It's really kind of easy to remember the inversions of the 7th chord, right? Equals second inversion. Ooh. I can't see my keyboard. The pop filter's blocking it. Third inversion. Okay, great. So, as a result, what you see, excuse me, this has been written elsewhere, but never helps to have more explanations of something, redundant explanations. So I guess as a result of this, since this bass note of the chord we're trying to analyze matches the third note of the snowman, I guess it just follows that we're in second inversion, right?
Wait, it matches the fourth note, I think.
Yes, you are right. Thanks for catching that. Yes, I'm conflating treble and bass clef right now. Yes, absolutely. It matches the fourth note. So I mean, I'll just walk through that again, just in case that was confusing. So if the bottom note of the chord we're trying to analyze is the bottom note of the snowman chord, snowman version, we're in root position. The bottom note of the chord we're trying to analyze is the second note of the snowman chord, we're in first inversion. The bottom note of the chord we're trying to analyze is the third note of the snowman chord, we're in second inversion. If the bottom note of the chord we're trying to analyze is the fourth note of the snowman chord, then we're in third inversion, which is indeed the case. For a second there, I thought this was B because I was thinking bass clef, but it's treble clef. So, as a result, what you could write is just I2. Right. Alternatively, I guess you probably know this, but you could also write I4-2. Right. Either one is okay. The reasons for that, I think, are explained in the one note. And the place that's explained would be in the seventh chords section. Right. It just basically shows you why the bigger base numbers are what they are. It just has to do with the intervals created. So for instance, I called this a 2 or a 4-2, but technically if you want to be really explicit, you could call this a 6-4-2, right? Because in the closed voicing version of the inversion, this is what it looks like. The interval would be a sixth, a fourth between the bottom note and this note, and a second between the bottom note and the next note. Okay? So that's available for you to see under inversions of seventh chords, under chords, under theory. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about this?
Yeah, in the homework, why, like what Roman numeral pattern are we supposed to follow since the first chord is a lowercase?
Since the first chord is a lowercase, that means we're in a minor key.
So yeah, so like what is just the Roman numeral, like 1 through 7 for just minor chords? If there's
Okay, that's a good question.
Neapolitan chord.
Oh, including the Neapolitan chord?
Like without it, just like in general, like what's the formula for the minor?
Sure. I think I might have that somewhere over here. Let me see if I find it. I think I have it under triads. Triads of the harmonic minor scale. So there's different, I guess it depends on which minor you're dealing with. So what I have here are the triads of the harmonic minor scale. I guess it might be worth making one of these for the natural minor scale, but the reason why I have a slide for the harmonic minor scale is because when you have chords, generally the chords that are being utilized are the ones that are derived from the harmonic minor scale. And that's because the 5 chord has the raised leading tone of the scale that we're in. It has that B. In the case of C minor, it has a B natural instead of a B flat, which is in the key signature. So I guess like the most relevant chart that you'd find would be here. Triads of the harmonic minor scale under chords. And I could quickly construct this for you, just to show you how something like this is done. So if we're in the key of, I don't know, I guess we can be in the key of G minor, just for fun. Or actually, let's go to the key of A minor. Okay? So what we have, let me remove this cursor really quickly. Okay. So what we have, I guess it's logical to think that this is the scale that we're starting with, right? And I guess let's just do harmonic minor. Okay? Good so far, right? Now, let's actually take this a step further and add triads above all of these notes. Okay? So notice how these notes are the notes of the harmonic minor scale, right? So that's an important thing to remember. Right? Those are the notes of the harmonic minor scale. Just to be really explicit, I can draw that sharp again. Put it in parentheses, but forgot where that feature is. Yeah, and so the result of doing this in a harmonic minor scale instead of a natural minor scale is that all of these G's are sharped. All of the 7th scale degrees are sharped. So anytime you have a chord that contains a 7th scale degree, it's going to be sharped. So if I actually add in some chords here, this is what's going to happen. Some Roman numeral symbols. So we'll have a 1 chord right here. And I guess what's determined based on the capitalization of these chords is the quality of the chord itself. I mean, in other words, the quality of the chord determines what capitalization you employ. So, for instance, right here, this is the quality of this chord is what? It is, well, what do you have? You have B to D, which is a minor third, right? I guess if I open up my keyboard, right? You have B to D. You can see it's a minor third, right? In half step distance, and you have a minor third here in half step distance, right? So that makes up a diminished chord, right? You'd have a 2, it's got to be a 2, and it's going to be a diminished. Whoops, diminished. Okay. Now here, just from the intervallic formula, you have a major third, and then you have another major third. And by definition, that's augmented. Okay. Right, so it's going to be 3 augmented, so you see a little plus. Over here, you have a 4, but it's, right, you see a minor third with another minor third. Sorry, no you don't. See a minor third with a major third on top, minor third on bottom, a major third on top, which I guess will be minor. So you're going to have it lowercase, right? Here, you have major third on bottom, minor third on top. You have major. Here, you got a major third on bottom, minor third on top. So it's going to be capital. Here, you have a minor third on bottom and a minor third on top. So it's going to be diminished, right? And then over here, you have a minor third on bottom and a major third on top. So it's going to be lowercase. Okay? Now, these are the standard chords. Now, that's not to say that in certain situations, you might find a chord that there are certain situations where you have like borrowed chords, or you have this thing called modal mixture, which basically you're allowed to reference another chord for the time being. So for instance, you might encounter in your music, not very common, you might encounter this. If you did encounter this, this is no longer augmented, right? This would be major. So that's a little bit confusing, right? But that's just the way it is. Sometimes a composer might want to reference a chord that isn't derived from the harmonic minor scale. They might want to derive it from one of the other minor scales, right? As you're aware of, these are all the triads of the harmonic minor scale. But if I drew, for instance, all the triads of the natural minor scale, you'd see a different story. Oh, why can't I remember my shortcuts? Nope, that's not. I remembered it. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Okay. So what you see here are the triads. Not quite it, actually. Now, what I could draw over here are the triads. I can basically draw an A natural minor scale. And notice how I left out the G sharp, right? If I play this on the piano, right? You have a similar sort of situation as before, right? The qualities of the triads will be slightly different. And I guess how different they'll be is the following. So over here we have the natural minor scale. Here we have the harmonic minor scale. You have the triads derived from the harmonic minor scale, and here you have the triads derived from the natural minor scale. So if I were to actually think about the Roman numeral analysis for these chords, we could do the same process again. In fact, I think this is worth doing because it's a confusing topic all in itself. It's worth doing this over and over again. So here, it's a great way to practice our intervals too. I guess I'll give you the first one. You can think about it. It's a minor third on bottom and a major third on top. This time I'll just tell you the answers. I won't tell you the answers. I'll just tell you the intervals. Minor third on bottom, minor third on top. major third on bottom, minor third on top. Minor third on bottom, major third on top. Minor third on bottom, major third on top. Major third on bottom, minor third on top. Major third on bottom, minor third on top. No, ooh, I messed this up. This is a major third on bottom and a minor third on top. So it should be capital. Major triad. Then you see a major third on bottom, minor third on top. See a minor third on bottom, major third on top. Okay? So you can see how if you build triads that are derived off the natural minor scale, the qualities and the subsequent Roman numerals will be different than if you build triads off the harmonic minor scale. So when you're analyzing chords in minor, you might refer to either of these paradigms interchangeably. There are certain tendencies, though. For instance, the 5 chord will usually always be minor. What am I saying? The 5 chord in minor will usually always be major. It's a mouthful. In quality. So the 5 chord will be a major triad. Okay? That's why you're more likely to see a capitalized 5, right? You just like this motion. This G sharp, this 7, basically you like to see a half-step resolution between the 7th scale degree and the 1st scale degree. So for instance, this is more satisfying. Like this has the most amount of tension, this note right here. And it has the most gratifying, it subsequently has the most gratifying release of tension. So for instance, ooh, that's much louder. I'm sorry to blast your ears. Is that too loud? I could lower the keyboard volume. Lower the keyboard volume a little bit. So it's a little more even keel. Okay, so what you have here, if I harmonize this, that sounds pretty resolute, right? Compare that with this. It doesn't sound as tense, right? Like right here, that sounds more tense, right? It's not to say that you can't do this. So this one, this more tense scenario utilizes this leading tone. So composers generally keep the 5 chord major. Not always, but a lot of the time. Okay, that was an exploration into functional harmony, basically the triads of the major and minor scale, and then I guess a logical follow-up would be to look at, I guess, the triads of the major scale, and you could also insert the Neapolitan chord into minor as well. So, for instance, if I did da da da. In fact, that's exactly what Beethoven does. In Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, we're in a minor key, yet he still uses a flat 2 major. Oops. Flat 2. He still utilizes this chord. Okay. Okay. So what you see here is a chord that Beethoven utilizes in his minor piece. Okay. So if we're going back to this Beethoven right here, and we're analyzing these particular chords, let's take a look. So you have a minor. Then we've discovered that this is a 3rd inversion of a minor chord. Now, what do we have here? We basically have a minor triad. Sorry, we have a major triad on the 6th scale degree. That's interesting. Okay, so that exists. That's what we'd expect, right? The 6th scale degree is capitalized. The chord built on the 6th scale degree is capitalized, indicative of major, right? So what we have here is a 6th chord. Okay. I did that quickly because I knew that A, in relation to the key of C sharp, is a 6th. Okay? Now, over here, what do we have? Well, what is the root of this chord? Someone pipe in. What is the root of this chord?
D natural.
D natural, exactly. Okay, so D natural in the key of C sharp minor. Huh. Isn't that interesting? So let's just quickly draw. Oh, I think I did actually. D natural in the key of C sharp minor. What in the world? Well, right? You can see how D sharp is really the second scale degree, but a D natural, that's a flat 2, right? So what you have right there is precisely what we were talking about. Now, granted, it's in a different inversion, so I guess I can still draw the snowman for it. Okay? And what you see, I guess, is that this is a flat 2. This is a chord built on the flat second scale degree, and it's also, I guess, in which inversion is it in?
First inversion.
First inversion. Great. So what we have is a flat 2, 6. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that pretty? Okay. Okay, so now we have some good old stuff that we're kind of expecting. I guess I can get rid of this. Redundant. Rid thee, please. No, it's not redundant. It is redundant. Yep, I got rid of it. Great. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What do we have here? Well, I guess I'm going to write this better. I'm going to write this like this. Okay, the reason I'm writing it like this is because this is really a 5/7 chord. I guess I gave away the answer. And it's easy to kind of see how it is in this particular context, right? It's not easy to see. This is why spelling is so important, right? So earlier I had it spelled like this. It's not very easy to see a snowman there, is it? Right? But here you can see an incomplete snowman. You're starting to see the makings of a snowman, right? So this is why spelling is very important. You might think it's obnoxious to spell things like using the correct like alphabetic letter, right? But if you don't use the correct alphabetic letter, it actually makes it more nightmarish to process, because spelling actually makes a lot of things nice and easy to read. Like spelling makes things so that you actually see snowman a lot. So for instance, if I were to be like really obnoxious here, I could make this, check this out. Whoops. So look at this. Does this look like a triad to you? No, it doesn't, right? This is a terrible way to spell this chord because it doesn't show any kind of reference to the idea that this chord is a major triad or a minor triad or a diminished triad or an augmented triad, right? It doesn't even look like a triad at all. You would think this is some sort of bizarre jazz chord until you realize, wait a second, this is just a triad spelled terribly. Okay? So that's my logic for respelling this way instead of the other way. Okay? And you could see right here that if I just, it's only logical that if I basically filled in this chord, what I would get, I guess it's showing all these redundant accidentals, right? This is what I had, basically. This is what's in the music itself, but it's the fifth is omitted, right? But if you actually fill in the rest of the snowman, what you get is basically, I guess you compare the root of the snowman against the key that we're in. We're in C sharp minor, okay? And this note right here is, someone pipe in, what is this note?
G sharp.
Did someone say B sharp?
G.
It's actually not B sharp. This note right here?
G. G.
Did you say D?
G as in grape.
G sharp?
Oh, you said G is in grape. Okay, great. Yeah, G sharp. Great. Grape, I should say. Yeah, so this is G sharp. And what is the relationship? Someone else pipe in. What is the relationship of G sharp in the key of C sharp minor? What scale degree is G sharp in the key of C sharp minor?
The fifth.
It's the fifth. Okay, great. Absolutely. The fifth, absolutely. So it just happens to be, you have a snowman built for us. That's awesome. Okay, 5/7. Now, what do we have over here? Well, what do we have over here? Well, we have a snowman. Okay, so I'm going to rotate the people. I have no way of knowing who is answering the questions, but someone new who hasn't answered a question before, answer this question. What is the inversion of this chord right here?
Six four. C 6/4.
Exactly. Great. So I guess it's C sharp 6/4, which means that we're in, it's basically C sharp in the key that we're in is, so 1, right? C sharp in the key of C sharp minor is the first scale degree, which is why it's a 1 for the first Roman numeral. Okay? I don't know how this little, is anyone seeing this yellow thing on my screen? Oh, did someone annotate that? Okay. Did someone draw that on my screen? I don't know how to erase it, but if someone knows how to erase it, erase it. Unless my monitor's bugging out, which I would be very sad if that was the case. Can anyone else see this yellow line right here?
Yeah, it's there.
I see it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's very significant. No, it's not. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this chord. Oh, look at this. Okay, now, sorry. Sorry, I'm getting my spelling. I'm trying to spell this in a way that isn't obnoxious, but I'm forgetting how to do that. Okay, that's better. Okay. Okay, so what do we have here? Look at that. What does this look like to you?
The sus chord?
The sus chord, exactly. So when you see something like this, actually, in classical notation, so then I guess I got to ask you this. What is the root of the sus chord? I guess it's, what is the root of the sus chord? I guess you can kind of look at the bass note of the right hand. You can look at the bass note of the left hand. What does it seem to be the bass? What does it seem like the root of this sus chord is?
G sharp.
G sharp. Okay, so what is G sharp in the key of C sharp minor?
The fifth.
Fifth. Okay. So what they call this is just a 5. Oh gosh. Oh, I don't know the symbol for that. I'm gonna have to exit out of this and go to lyric mode really quickly. 5 sus. Okay. Which, in classical music, almost always resolves to. The sus chord normally resolves to something a little juicier, which is basically the actual chord itself. I mean, you could see that this, if I basically, this is just an open voicing root position chord right here, meaning if I did this, whoops, you would basically see how the snowman, the bottom note of the snowman is basically the same as the bass note of the chord we're trying to analyze. So this is just a dominant 7th chord. So this is very common. You'll see a 5/7 chord preceded by a sus chord, and that just adds so much juiciness to it. Remember, remember how earlier we were talking about how in sus chord land, there's this idea that there's a chord tone that isn't present in the sus chord that eventually becomes present. It's like the sus chord is like it's suspending the tension, and then after that it basically resolves to a note that's in the chord, right? That's precisely what's happening here, and that just makes it such a juicy resolution. Oh gosh, sorry. Just doesn't get any better than that, guys. Right? It's so juicy. So like preceding a chord with a sus chord just makes it that much juicier, okay? So this is kind of cool. I remember a while back, I guess we never analyzed the final chord. I'll just give you the answer. It's a 1 chord. A while back, I gave this to you, I think last quarter, and you guys looked at me very confused. But I guess it's kind of cool that you know how to analyze the opening statement of Moonlight Sonata. That's kind of cool, right? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about this? I know it's a little bit of a review, but don't want to take.
So, just to be sure, when you, I think Fernando just made the same comment. If it as sus, it's implying that it's sus4.
I would say in classical music, yeah, I think that is the case. That's the most common sus variant. Yeah, and in classical music, classical analysis often doesn't disambiguate, it doesn't, it doesn't kind of define it that thoroughly. It just says, it's a sus. Oftentimes you'll see that. But I think so. I'm trying to think of a scenario where it isn't the case. I don't think you hear that a lot in classical music. Well, maybe you do. But either way, I think they would still call that a sus. Even though what I just played was a sus too, they would just call this a sus. I mean, I guess there's nothing saying that you can't just do that. Okay, great. Hopefully that makes sense.
I have a question about one of the chords on the homework. It seems as if it's a triad, but it's missing a chord. It's like the first chord of the second measure.
Okay. This is such a common way to represent a dominant 7th chord. So for instance, I guess I should open this on the appropriate document. I have a document called Incomplete 7th Chords. Incomplete Snowman. This is a good document to put this on. So incomplete snowman refers to the idea that you have a snowman that isn't quite complete. There's something missing from it, right? But if you rearrange it into root position, into a closed voicing form, you'll basically see what you're trying. You'll get the answer that you're looking for. Let's take a look at this, for instance. So what we have here is basically this, and then we have, right, this is very common, okay? So Roman numeral wise, what you see here, I really need a shortcut for this, but you see a 1 chord right here. And then let's figure out what this is. Let's make a closed voicing root position version of the chord. And what you'll find is that you won't get a complete snowman. You'll get an incomplete snowman. Okay? But the good news is an incomplete snowman is it's very easy to inference the complete snowman in that situation. Okay? Are you connecting the idea of changing this into this?
Yeah.
Cool. So then I guess once you make that logical leap, then you can just fill in the rest of the snowman, and then basically you compare. It's the same process, right? You compare this note with the corresponding note in the snowman, and then you decide which inversion you are. But this is a very common, I guess long story short, this is a very common way of representing an inversion of a 7th chord. That is to say that the 5th is often omitted because it kind of adds some weight to it. It's lighter. So if I did this, ooh, whoops, sorry. All right. Versus see how the second one sounds a little heavier, right? So in the third of classical era music, there's a lightness to it. So they said, let's get rid of the fifth. It still kind of communicates the same thing from the standpoint that when you leave out the fifth, it's not really telling you something that's that important, right? And I say this because when you're comparing a major triad with a minor triad, they both have a perfect fifth, right? What really disambiguates a major triad from a minor triad is the third, right? So that's the real thing that really differentiates the two things, right? Because, a triad, a major triad and a minor triad both have a perfect fifth. They both have this G. For instance, a C major triad has a G, a C minor triad has a G, right? But one of them has an E flat, one of them has an E natural. So I think that's the logic behind getting rid of it. They just left it out because they said, well, who needs it, right? It makes it weighs it down a little bit, right? Okay? Okay. I think there's something else with the homework that... I think actually that was what I wanted to say about the homework. I think those were the two things that I wanted to mention. You actually, Tate, I'm glad you asked that question. I was hoping someone would ask that question. Yeah, and I think everything else is more straightforward.
Also, one more question. Like, where are you, like, what 39 notes are you referring to as far as solfege syllables are concerned?
So I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Maybe I counted wrong. No, I think it's 39.
Okay. So
worst case scenario, you get more points if I added too many notes. But yeah.
So just the treble clef notes?
Yeah, and the bass clef chords are just referring to these 9 chord things right here.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the way I calculate how many points you get for chords, and you should get partial credit. If your TA is not giving you partial credit, then explain to them that you need full partial credit. I just count the number of notes in the chord, and then that's how I tally it up. So I feel like it's more work to complete a chord that's like this than a simple triad, so that's why I give you more points for chords like this. I did add a count in for the dictation, so that should make it a little easier. So I think a thing that I wanted to talk about today, which I think would be cool, is to kind of talk about the non-chord tones in the context of some music that you would see.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Could we go over form a little bit more in depth?
Oh, yes, that's what I wanted to talk about. That's another thing I wanted to talk about. I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, so form. Okay. So I guess one thing to keep in mind, this is salient to your homework, is that you need to understand some distinctions between binary and ternary form. Okay? So binary form consists of 2 related sections, and both sections are repeated. So the A section is repeated, and then the B section is repeated. And ternary form has 3 sections. It's A, B, A, right? It's you have a beginning section, you have a middle section, and then you have basically a recapitulation, right? So there are many variants to binary form, and here's one example. This is simple binary form, okay? In simple binary form, I guess the first thing to kind of know about binary form is how you kind of describe sections. And sections can be described in terms of the phrases that make them up. So for instance, this is, I guess, an anonymous minuet. That's the first phrase, right? Second phrase. Right? This has a more conclusive, they're both different. This actually goes to a different key area, but you can kind of segment these 2 ideas apart from each other, and they actually make kind of a unified whole. And so they constitute basically these two phrases constitute the first section of this piece, say A section. And they're both repeated. That's like adding more credence to the fact that these two sections are related. These two phrases are related is by the fact that they're repeated. And so I'll play this one more time. Right? That's the A section. The B section has stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the A section, in this case. Sorry, my Zoom window is blocking that. Okay, so this is simple binary form from the standpoint that there are two major sections in this piece. So there's this section. I guess I can box this in red as well. I think that will help. Right? Right. And then there's this section. Okay? And I guess the more nitty-gritty aspect of it is that there's two phrases that make up each of these sections. This isn't always the case. You could have different kind of structures within these sections, but I guess at a minimum level, you can't really construct a binary piece with no less than 4 phrases. You kind of need 2 phrases to kind of establish a section of a piece. So that's why you have 2 phrases here, and you have 2 phrases in the B section. Right? The A section has 2 phrases, and the B section has 2 phrases. And another way to think about 2 phrases is that are related is that they make up a period. So I guess the A section has a period, and the B section has a period. This is like the simplest kind of binary form you could have. Okay? So then there's this idea of rounded binary form. So notice in simple binary form, this might not be immediately apparent, but there's no sort of, the second part of the piece has no real, it doesn't really borrow, I guess it has some rhythmic ideas that are similar to the first part of the piece, but it doesn't have anything that's really similar to the first part of the piece in any other regard. Like it doesn't quote anything directly. Whereas in rounded binary form, there's this idea that there's a direct restatement of something from the first half of the piece. So in rounded binary form, this is the first half of the piece right here, and this is the second half of the piece. Now this is Greensleeves. No, this is not Greensleeves. This is, someone knows the name of the song.
Yeah.
Whatever this song is called, you guys know it, right? Does anyone know the name of the song?
Oh, Susanna.
Oh, Susanna. Oh, Susanna. Oh, Susanna. Great. Oh, I can't be careful with that because it shifts all of my boxes that took a long time to put in there. Okay. Oh, Susanna. So this is a great example of a piece that's in rounded binary form. And the way that you can tell this is in rounded binary form is that the ending of the first section is the same as the ending in the second section. So you're kind of rounding it out, kind of bringing it back home. Okay, so this is rounded binary form. Okay, so here, compared to here, there's nothing in the first section. I mean, you'd have to actually analyze this to actually believe me. there's nothing directly quoted from the first section in the second section. Okay? That's what makes this simple binary form. They're totally separate entities. Okay? Whereas in rounded binary form, there's this idea that there's actually a direct quoting of an aspect of the first part in the second part. And it happens at the end of the second part. You're kind of rounding it out, bringing it back home. Okay? Here's another example of rounded binary form. Make this a little bit smaller. Oh, I'm going to mess this up. I'm actually going to show you a cool website where you can learn more about this, and it'll actually play this in context. This is where I actually got a lot of my examples from, and where I subsequently annotated them. And I'll just play it from this example. So their rounded binary example is this. Actually, I could have played this. That's fine. Well, I'll just let them play it. Phrase 2. Got it? Oh, sorry. Give me a sec. Haywire. Right? Do you guys see how that works? The first section consists of two phrases, phrase 1 and phrase 2. Right? Okay? And the second section consists of two phrases as well. Right? However, in this particular instance, the last phrase of the second section, the second phrase, second section, is like a direct quote, or it's very reminiscent of the first section. Okay? So that's the idea behind rounded binary form. It's sort of rounded. You're kind of relating. I kind of think of the word rounded as like rounding something out. You're kind of averaging two things out, right? If that makes sense. You can see how done. Right? You can see how that's very similar to right? It's basically the same, right? So that's rounded binary form, okay? Great. Ternary form. Let's analyze this piece together. Said me at some point, thinking that this was a good idea. I think it's a good idea. Let's see. So what do we have here? Okay? So what do you see here, first of all? Where do you feel the phrase break? Okay? Where do you feel like it's the end of the first phrase? I'm going to play this through, and I want someone to chime in when they think the first phrase is ended, okay? Okay. Someone chimed in, I think. Yes, this is where the first phrase ended. So we're actually in the key of E flat major. There's a feeling to it, right? It just feels like there was some sort of cadential resolution right there, or lack of resolution. We're in the key of E flat major. And so what you see here is, I guess if I were to draw in the chords that made me feel that way, the chord tones that made me feel that way, I would draw this. There are some harmonic situations that lead up to this. There are many cadences there are many chord progressions, I should say, that exceed this idea of a 5 chord to a 1 chord. There are many other things. So when I hear this, I kind of hear this. Whoops. Right? But here, right here, B flat and D make up, what we've kind of determined, kind of made up as an incomplete snowman, right? A B flat and a D in the key of E flat major would make up basically a 5 chord. Okay? So you have a half cadence. Then you have this. I'm gonna play along and tell me when you think that this ends. It ends right there. I'm going to speed up a little bit in the interest of time. And I'm going to say this. This is where the second phrase ends, and there's an authentic cadence right here. Okay? So here's a new section. Okay? Okay. So this is new material, right? I'm going to group this, basically, as one phrase. Okay? I'm going to group this as second phrase. Second section. Okay? This seems very different than this. Okay? What do you see over here? What you see is really the same exact material at the very outset of the piece. So as a result, this is part. This is the third part of the piece, which is the same exact material as the first part of the piece. So I guess you can call this A section. This is the B section. And this is the A section. Okay, I'm gonna press ahead even more because I want to explain all these things to you before the end of class. Okay. Ternary form we've discussed as being ABA. There's this idea of sectional versus continuous. Okay? And this is the idea. In sectional binary form, the A section ends on the tonic chord. Right? So we're in the key of G minor. And this right here, this section right here ends in G minor. It ends in the tonic of the key, okay? That's the first section. So that's what basically is sectional binary form. This is to say that the second section is going to be in a new key, right? It's basically sectioning off these two sections in such a way that they have their own key areas, okay? So part one is in G minor, and the second part actually begins in the relative major, B flat major. Okay, so they're sectioned off in terms of key area. Okay? If I'm being a little fast here, just check out the YouTube video and watch over again, or email me, and we can discuss this in greater detail. Okay, now contrast sectional binary form with continuous binary form. And in that situation, the A section ends in a new key area that isn't the tonic. Okay? So in that particular situation, it's kind of the inverse. You don't actually end in the same key that you started in. but you actually kind of continue, you kind of end in the key area that the next section begins in. So there's a continuous sort of smooth transition between the A section and the B section in terms of key area, okay? So what we have here is an example of continuous binary form. We're in C major, okay? We ended in the 5 chord. I guess here's the thing. If it's not the tonic chord that you end in, it's continuous. So think of not tonic as continuous. If the chord that ends the first section is tonic, it's sectional. If the chord that ends the first section is not the one chord, it is continuous. That's just the definition, okay? And then it turns out that this next section continues in this key area. Apologize for the misreading, but basically what you see, the takeaway between sectional and continuous binary form is that in sectional binary form, the A section ends in the tonic of the key, basically in the one chord. Okay. Whereas in continuous binary form, the A section ends on the 5, or another chord that isn't the 1, okay? That's the difference between sectional and continuous binary form, okay? Okay. Boy, there are a lot of variations to this. It's balanced binary. Okay. In balanced binary, the first section ends in a new key. And the second section ends with the same cadence, transposed so that the piece ends in the starting key. That's a mouthful. So right here, this is the end of the first section. But here's what I want you to realize about this. This ends in C major, okay? This is a cadence in C major. However, we started in F major, okay? Now, look at this. The second section plays through, and look at the ending section of the second section. It's the same exact thing as this, except it's actually in the original key. It's actually in F major. Okay? So, in some ways, you can kind of think of this as the following. You remember how before, well, you might remember this. It's happened kind of fast, but we talked about how in rounded binary form, there is this element of repeating a passage from the first section in the second section, especially near the end. You might wonder what the difference between this and balanced binary form is. And I think the real difference is that they're very similar, but the main difference is that balanced binary really pertains to the very end of the piece. It's like the cadential sort of event that occurs at the end. And it also has this idea of basically having this idea where you have the first section end not in the key, cadence not in the key, and the second section is the same material, but it actually cadences in the key. Okay? Okay. I won't actually go into this rounded binary versus ternary thing. Are there any questions about this? Let me look at your faces and see how confused you look. I'm seeing people scratch their heads. Or maybe I just saw one person scratch their head. Fear not, this part of the homework's only worth 10 points. And let's just look at it really quickly. Okay. Okay, so for one thing, how many sections are there? It's kind of given to you, right? There are 2 sections. So I don't know what form has 2 sections, but I'm sure someone does, and don't say it out loud, okay? Then I guess here are some things to consider. How similar is the first section and the second section? How similar is the end of the first section and the end of the second section? Okay? What key does the first section end in? What key does the second section end in? Okay? Now, here's the thing. If the first section ends in, well, I guess, what key does the first section end in? I'm not going to tell you. I mean, I guess what chord does the end of the first section allude to? Is it the 1 chord? Is it the 5 chord? Well, that will give you an idea of, I guess, this term. Right? In terms of being descriptive, right? Then I guess you would ask, well, is there an element of the ending right here that reappears over here? Well, if there's not, then I guess you might be able to rule out rounded or balanced, right? Because there's no like recurring element of the end of the first section and the end of the second section, correct? If there isn't, right, you can rule those 2 things out. Okay? So this is worth 10 points. So it's basically like predicated on being as descriptive as you can. So I guess I can write this in really quickly. Sectional versus continuous. Rounded or not rounded. I guess a subset of that is balanced or not balanced. Simple, or I guess you could say simple or rounded. Binary or ternary. Right? Consider each of these as being like 3 points, right? So you could say a possible answer could be like sectional, simple, binary, or rounded, sectional, binary, or continuous, rounded, binary, things like that, right? You can imagine how these can kind of make up your statement. Okay. Oh, I see some questions in the chat. I see someone's, why is the 5 sus not a 1 sus 2 chord? Well, I guess the reason I called it a 5 sus chord is because of the fact that it eventually resolves to a 5 chord, and it's just characteristic of this 5 to be like, it's basically you're suspending a specific note in this 5/7 chord, and that note is being suspended here. So, and also the fact that I kind of am calling this root position from the standpoint that it's really emphasized in both hands, so which kind of makes you feel like this is the root in some ways, or the most significant note, right? Do borrowed chords have the same function as their in-key counterpart? Unpack that sentence. Do borrowed chords have the same function as their in-key counterpart? That's a mouthful. Go to the section. Payon, can you elaborate a little bit on that? I guess if you can't, oh yeah, go ahead.
So if you have like a minor chord and a major key, is it still predominant?
Sorry, you were kind of cutting in and out a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
If you have a minor chord,
I heard if you have a minor chord. You can type it in the chat if you want. Sorry. For some reason, you're cutting in and out. If you have a 4 in a major key, is it still predominant? A minor 4 in a major key, is it still predominant? I think it still has sort of a predominant function. It still wants to resolve to a 5. I think so. You know, if you have this. Right. So I guess you could call it predominant. It has a function that wants to resolve to the dominant. Cool. Someone said the heavenly chord. I don't know what chord you're referring to, but oh, I think maybe I was referring to this. Right? Oh, it's such a juicy chord. Okay, great. Like, let's see. Does anyone else have any questions about this? I was hoping to go over. I didn't get a chance to. I had all this stuff ready to. I was hoping to analyze some of these non-chord tones in terms of music, but I guess we can always do that another time. I was pretty explicit in how to complete the homework too, so I think that may or may not have been necessary because I included a lot of context on each problem. So hopefully it all makes sense. I can stick around and kind of answer any questions about the homework as you need. We're on record. Maybe I'll stop recording. Stop recording.